kita. Sungkai mina nabana nabanema. Lahat ko siyang nagtalos kukukani. At kawakas kay kaibigan kukani. At siya tapad kakunin kung kay kita. Sungkai mina nabana nabanema.
I'm the son of the late Clarence Dennis. My father was heavily involved in working for the civil rights of Indigenous people in Canada. He spent the later years of his life advocating for the housing rights of Indigenous people who were homeless in Vancouver's downtown east side. I've met so many people across Canada who have stories of working with my dad to advocate for our rights to be treated as full human beings. So many people sacrificed their lives in something they believed in so that my generation could have a better life experience than theirs. My dad's older sister, my Auntie Marjorie White, collaborated with her fellow First Nations University students to create the first of the Friendship Center societies that began in Vancouver, BC, and has since spread across Canada. She was a lead founder of the Circle of Young Eagles Society, a halfway home for people leaving incarceration to transition back into their community. She also was instrumental in developing better housing for low-income Indigenous people living in Vancouver, BC. I come from a legacy of strong leaders who have invested their lives sacrificing to help our Indigenous people experience freedom and hope. Fueled by their passion and concern for our people, my journey took a similar path of getting my master's degree in social work, through which I've had the privilege of serving Indigenous communities. Our Indigenous experience was made difficult through colonial trauma, which has had a painful ripple effect in every generation since. Still, we are healing as a people. We are resilient, and we are strong. My healing journey with my Creator God has led me to decolonize my understanding of His ways. In light of what the Bible tells me about my Creator, our people were in harmony with His Spirit prior to the arrival of those who misrepresented His character. The newcomers taught us that our ways were evil, that the only way to be saved was to become like them. The message of colonial Christian missionaries who hurt our people with a spirit of greed was not in line with the character of our Creator as described in the Bible. Our people understood God's manna enough economy that everyone in the community should have enough. We understood how to be sustainable caretakers of His creation, not gluttonous consumers for our gain. We understood how to honor all the gifts given to us by our Creator as sacred. I now see how the Bible is a source of truth that aligns best with the cultural values of my people before colonial influence. My study of the Bible also helped me understand that many of the church traditions brought over during European colonial expansion were not rooted in God's ways. Many colonial Christian traditions invented in Rome were intended to take the place of our Creator's laws, times, and seasons of celebration given from the beginning for those living in His house. The path my Creator laid out to restore me into His house leads me to get rooted back into His ways with His spirit of love for myself, for my fellow created beings, and most importantly, for Him. Our Creator is the head chief of our human house, and as a good leader, He cares deeply for everybody in His house. My father used to tell me that the most important characteristic of the head of the house is to sacrifice for the well-being of others. The head chief is really the lead servant. Our story totems show us this by placing the most important figure at the bottom and holding all others up. Our people learned this way from our Creator God, who also placed himself in the lowest position, the position of a servant, in order to lift us up. The Bible says, "For it pleased the Father that in him all the fullness should dwell, and by him to reconcile all things to himself. By him, whether things on earth or things in heaven, having made peace through the blood of his cross."
In this series, we are unpacking the teachings given to us in the original sanctuary by our Creator. In the last episode, we talked about the entry gate, representing our acceptance of Jesus Christ being the only access way into a restorative relationship with our Creator God. The next element in the sanctuary courtyard, just inside the entry gate, was an altar of sacrifice. The purpose of this altar was to burn sacrifices brought by the people to pay for their wrongs of breaking God's laws of love. It was the place where they repented and acknowledged their need for reconciliation with God. The only way for their wrongs against God to be reconciled was by the sacrifice of a perfect lamb. The perfect lamb represented God's plan to pay the price himself through his Son Jesus Christ, who lived a perfect life in order to reconcile our debt of wrongs against his ways of love and restore us to a right relationship with him. A little over 2,000 years ago, God sacrificed himself in the form of his Son Jesus to pay the penalty of death for everyone who has broken his way of love by hurting ourselves, others, and him. He did this to fulfill the need of all human beings to be restored to the right relationship with him once again. Our family and friends will share with you how reconciliation with Creator God has enabled us to decolonize our mind, body, spirit, and relationship with nature and others. In this way, we are able to thrive more fully as our Creator intended for us.
My name is Simon Dennis. My Aboriginal name, Indian name you might call it, was, it used to be Yoyutspanuk, which I handed down to my son Waylon, but now I have a new name.
Yeah.
Robert always reminds me, and I say, what is it, Robert? What was it again?
Ta'akwat.
Ta'akwat.
Yeah.
Ta'akwat. So I walk with that name knowing that I'm going to capture the full meaning. Why was I called Ta'akwat? You know, and I'd like to maybe just pursue that and say, what is the meaning behind that name? Just like I want to know the meaning behind Simon or Dennis. You know, why weren't we called our Indian names? Mm-hmm. Did we have Indian names when we were growing up?
Yeah.
Did our grandfather have Indian names? I went to Skid Row. I just lost it. I just didn't like the life I was living because I was supposed to do this and I was supposed to do that, but I wasn't living up to their expectations. So what did I have? You know, I said to myself, I'm just going to live my life the best way I can. So I ended up down in Skid Row. That was in Oppenheimer Park. That was in what they call Pigeon Square. And that was being with people who were just like us. They were lost. It's almost like when they were drunk, they were judged. They were told you're good for nothing. That's how you're going to grow up. So in our mind, hey, that's what we're going to be, eh? So it was. So I went to Skid Row. I was homeless. I went to jail. I committed crimes. Because so what? Who cares? In order to get something, you have to do it the wrong way, you might say. Stealing, cheating, whatever. That's the only way that I knew how. But I look at, you know, when I went to Alberta, when I first sobered up, like it was a 28-day program, I was there for 28 days and I said, okay, it's good. What I'm doing is I'm feeling sober for the first time for 28 whole days. 28 whole days. And that was the beginning of my journey, my healing journey. Because when I grew up and I started to think about how wonderful it is to be sober, how wonderful it is to know that where I slept last night, how wonderful it is to know I have a roof over my head, food on the table. And then I look at myself, is there anything more that I need to do? And sure enough, when I sobered up, I told you about this beautiful woman that came into my life. She was in the same treatment center. We got married in 1980. I found a new hope. It's okay to be your human self. In other words, make mistakes sometimes.
Yeah.
But like I said, we have cleansing. We can be able to, hey, you know what? What I thought, what I said, what I heard, how I acted was wrong. How do I correct that? And it's our cultural cleansing. We can have cultural cleansing. We can be forgiven. So my journey was that feeling like I was a nobody to knowing that I'm somebody now because of the Creator. Because I know now that I can feel cleansed, I can feel forgiven for the mistakes that I make.
The journey to try to keep my body good for the Lord and honor the Lord through my body has been had a lot of ups and downs. When I was younger, of course, I just didn't take care of myself the proper way, and you suffer. You really truly suffer. You're laying the groundwork for your entire life's health when you're young, and you just don't appreciate that. You think you can stay up all night and whatever. There's a lot of bad health practices that people do. I always had pretty good examples, and I always heard stories about our ancestors that gave me a lot of courage and inspiration. For example, we used to have runners who would run for 50 miles, sometimes up to 100 miles in one day to deliver messages. And they couldn't do that if they weren't in good shape. None of our people were overweight back then. Our people were ate well, but they would only eat what they needed. There was a lot of exercise involved, clearly, with taking care of the gardens and I mean, a lot of things were done outside. So there was a lot of sunshine and, just really healthful living. And so those principles were passed down to me. I try really hard to honor God in everything I do now. When I wake up, I just dedicate my life all over again to Him. I ask Him for help through the day. I ask that He will help me to honor Him, and of course, that involves taking really good care of myself, because this is His church that I'm walking around with. And I just really try hard to do all that I can do for His glory.
I was never really the best fisherman on the coast, but was up there. And many of my friends couldn't believe how many boats I accumulated. In the same time, they struggled with their one. I had 19 seiners at one time, and I employed at least 100 students during the summer months. I never participated in any fishing on Sabbath. There's many times it opened Saturday evening in the summer at 6. And my boats and other Adventists from Port Hardy, we would all anchor together until after sundown. Then we would all head out. And herring season, there's several times it opened on Sabbath, and herring, to participate in it, you have to have a herring license. And I had several of them myself, but to fish all areas, I had to lease herring license. In them days, to lease a license was between 150 to 160,000 per license, and normally I would lease at least 4 or 5 licenses. So some of them license I leased we weren't able to use because it opened on Sabbath. So some of my friends would call and ask if they could lease a license. And I thought, well, I don't think it would be right for me to lease it because, I didn't make any deals prior to that. So I said, no, it isn't for lease. So there's times I would forego 4 licenses and not use it. But at the end of the day, we were still up the top or close to it. So I knew, I have nothing to worry about. Yeah, our loving God looked after us. Well, to be our leader, if we can show honesty, I believe that's probably number 1. To be honest with our people, to be transparent, no favoritism. Everybody should be treated the same. And we've had leaders in our community that had that principle. And like I say, all our folks, they do believe we have a creator, which is very good. Very, very good.
My ancestors come from the Moose Cree First Nation in northern Ontario, Moose Factory area. My father's ancestors also come from around Winnipeg and Selkirk and the Red River Métis. In the process of trying to find who I was and trying to figure out, there was holes, there were different questions within who I was and how I fit into the world. I found that I initially turned to the Christian church, Seventh-day Adventist church, and found myself reconciling myself to Jesus, to the Creator. As I looked at that and I started reconnecting with my Indigenous community, my Cree ancestors, my Métis ancestors, they were the ones who helped me to see that missing piece was God created me as a Cree man. I grew up knowing that I was Indigenous, but without the culture, right? Without the teachings, without the family connections, the deep ones, without connection to my land. That part of my identity was missing, and God over time has been helping me to restore that He intended me to be Indigenous, and yet the processes of colonization took that away from me. And so now I'm feeling more comfortable in my skin, so to speak. I feel more fully reconciled to God because I know who I am, who He intended me to be. And so with others, I seek then to help them along that path, to see them for who they are. How can they live in balance with themselves, with Creator, and then with others? So others have been a part of the process of helping me. The community that I belong to as an Indigenous person, or communities, have been aiding me in the reconciliation process with Creator God. And so I see it in my teaching, both in the Bible and in my Cree culture, that it's my responsibility then to help that continued reconciliation be happening with other people. And I've chosen a number of professions as a chaplain, a psychotherapist, a minister, to try to accomplish that. I've gone for walks in the woods and things like that as a grown adult and that, but when I was a kid, again, we were always in the forest, lakes. We grew up northwestern Ontario mostly, also some in Saskatchewan. We were always out on the land, always, my favorite thing to do Saturday mornings was to go out, pack lunch, and be gone for the day. Just walking, exploring the land, and then coming back, before Mom would get mad. So that was there too, and just my growth as an adult took me away from that. I really, really entered into this very distinctly about 10 years ago. Had a major crisis of faith. I left pastoral ministry. I was dealing with depression and anxiety. And one of the things that would help would be just, laying on the grass, putting your hands on there, knowing that you're in this space. This is where you are. This is where you're supposed to be in the moment. And so it's been a part of the healing process. Whenever I can, I get out, taking your shoes off, taking your socks off, and just, there's something completely different in that. And feeling the ground, feeling, that you're in, the territory of the ants. You're in the territory of the worms that are underneath that, when we hear the birds and chipmunks and stuff around us, I have come to recognize that even today, we're in their space. This is my home, this is their home, right? And how do I respect that? Going back to creation and this care for the earth, right? This idea that we're here to be caretakers of all of creation, that we all are in ways connected and related to this greater creation. And so how am I doing that? It's something I'm working on as well. I just want to continue to process it and be in that process of recognizing how I become more balanced and in more harmony with God. As I walk down the path and see a few leaves and the grass growing or a bird singing, but just really sit back and recognize that this was His original intention. One of my favorite verses, in Genesis chapter 3, God was walking in the garden, right? In the creation, in the cool of the evening. He was looking and wanting to hang out with Adam and Eve in just that, almost that sweet spot of the day, right? That just as the sun's starting to go down, and you just have a really beautiful area. There's sunset pictures, there's the hues of the sky, all of that. And it says that was a favorite time of God to hang out with His kids, right? So if that's how it started, I feel like that should be a part of what we're doing here today too. And a new earth to come, right? It's a new earth. There is a recreation of God's people, that resurrection, but there's also this sense that the creation around us, which Paul tells us, is groaning, waiting for the coming of Christ, that there is a restoration of this as well, but it's not, we don't have to wait, right? We can prepare and then get used to it here, and then, experience the fantastic recreation that God has in store for us.
We hope the stories of our friends and family have given you a clearer picture of how being reconciled with our Creator God through His sacrifice for us can help us decolonize our mind, body, spirit, and relationship with nature and others.
The word reconciliation means many different things to different people. To governments, reconciliation means one thing, but likely something entirely different to the people who've been hurt by the wrongs. As I stand here at the site of the Port Alberni Indian Residential School, where my father and many other innocent children were brutally harmed and killed by those who vainly took on God's name, using Christianity as a cloak for covetousness, I struggle to see how these injustices could ever be fully reconciled. The Bible speaks of what it takes to be fully reconciled with God. Jesus said, "You have heard that it is said to those of old, 'You shall not murder,' and whoever murders will be in danger of judgment. But I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go your way. First, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift to me." God's way of reconciliation means that we recognize our immense need for His self-sacrificing gift of restoration with Him. This recognition of our need also makes us willing to sacrificially be reconciled with those we have harmed. The multi-generational impact of residential school challenges me to decolonize myself and ensure the legacy doesn't continue. This message gives me hope, because not only does it apply to me, but also it applies to those who have benefited from the harm committed against my people. The Bible tells me, "You are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people, and also members of His household, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, with Jesus Christ Himself as the chief cornerstone. In Him, the whole building is being joined together and rises to become a holy temple in the Lord. And in Him, you too are being built together to become a dwelling in which God lives by His Spirit. This is the kind of house in which I want to live, with my Creator of love in leadership."
The sanctuary you have built, where you reign forevermore. You will plant them on your mountain, the place you've made your home. The sanctuary